So I really appreciate, thank you, Matthew, for the invitation. You guys have an awesome group, especially for the middle of a rainy summer, so congratulations on that. Since we're announcing for auxiliaries, I have to give a shout out. I'm the president of the League of Republican Women of DC. With equal opportunity, we welcome both men and people not in DC, so if you have an interest in attending any of our events, doors are open, you're welcome. GOPwomendc.org, and we have Congressman Mike Turner coming up in September 30th. Not coaching across the river, but we're all family here. It's good to see some of my friends from the DC Young Republicans and the DC Log Cabin Republicans, so appreciate the work that everybody's doing as well. You know, I was emailing with a gentleman who I've just started to meet, Chairman John Whitbeck, and was congratulating him. There was a really what I thought was a fantastic Washington Post article that had talked about the diversity of candidates whom the Republican Party had both recruited but also encouraged to run. So I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in Virginia and also Northern Virginia and Arlington County. So congratulations on that. What I thought I'd do is maybe give you just a short little background on me, why I'm standing up here and what I think is moderately qualified to speak to you. And then what I'd like to do then is outline what I think is, either you consider it the problem or the challenge or the opportunity, depending on how optimistic you are. And then after we talk about that, then we can see what we think we can do about that, if that works for everybody. So I got into politics. I worked for Congressman Bob Ehrlich. So you may know him as the former governor of Maryland. So I worked for him while he was on the Hill as his press secretary and legislative assistant for a couple years, and was heavily involved in Maryland politics, was chairman of a county Republican club there as well. And what I joke is that, being a Republican in Maryland was not difficult enough, so I decided to move to DC. So I found my way to DC after grad school and got heavily involved in the party there. And I also say being a Republican in DC, and it's probably not too dissimilar from Arlington County, it's a little bit of a blood sport. And so as I was very heavily involved, joined the state party, I'm not making a political statement, but DC is actually recognized by the RNC, and so we get representation to the RNC as well, and so started getting very involved there and held different positions, and then I decided to run for National Committee Woman in DC. So I don't know if anybody knows anything about National Committee Woman, and don't be shy if you really don't know. Sort of know, sort of know. So the RNC has 168 members. So every state and territory gets 3 members. So Texas 3, Virginia 3, and DC 3. And what we do is we vote for the head of the Republican Party, and we approve budgets. We decide where the convention will be, and a couple other things we put on the convention. So I ran in DC, and what's interesting is that when you run for committee woman and committee man in DC, you're actually on the ballot. So what that meant was it was a citywide race, and unfortunately the Republicans don't live next to each other, so it was a lot of walking to doors. But it was actually a real campaign, and we did. I personally knocked on about 3,000 doors. We had a campaign knocking on another 3,000 doors. Did mailers, robocalls. Unfortunately, we could only raise money in $200 increments. So it's once you've exhausted your Christmas card list, then you try to make a few more friends. But as a result of that, I share that with you because when you do that much grassroots campaigning all over the city, and I campaign in all 8 wards. DC has all 8 wards. All are kind of every neighborhood's different. You get a feel for what being a Republican in a city is like, and it's not just an observation from my office. It becomes this is reality when you're knocking on people's doors. And so when I entered the RNC and I kind of started looking around, I realized that we don't have a lot of representation in cities, and so decided to try to do something about it. And that's when I launched City GOP, and I roped in one of my friends, Shoshana Wiseman. Some of you may know. Everybody knows Shoshana. So roped her in, and a couple other friends, Patrick DeRocher. So if you have an interest later, I might rope you in too. So what we did was recognize that there's an issue. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the problem. and then we'll get into what city GOP does. So let me just yell it out, okay? So top 12 largest cities, okay? In 1999, how many Republican mayors do you think we had? Top 12. Just yell it out. 10. Just don't say 13, okay?
5, 3,
7,
1.
Almost.
1,
It's
2.
like averages. 6.
Really?
6. Okay, so we had half, right? Which is good, you know. Top 2 parties, you know, we had half. Okay, so today, how many of those cities now have Republican mayors?
1.
2.
Oh.
I don't know if San Antonio counts, but they just got one.
Okay, well, is the person actually, have they been sworn in?
Not yet.
Because Jacksonville got one, they're the 13th largest city. And so when you actually look at the top 25 largest cities, you're looking at now 4 Republican mayors, and those represent 11% of the population, so 35 million people. I actually engaged somebody to pull all the county data or the city council data. So is this just an executive branch problem, right? Can we just not win citywide, or is this also a legislative branch problem? Can we just not have a lot of infrastructure? What I found out is that the problem is also on the legislative side, and so we have fewer than 20% of the city council seats in our cities. And what that creates is really a lack of infrastructure in cities. So I don't know if many of you experience this, but you know, you try to campaign, and I qualify Arlington County as an urban suburb, and I can talk about that in a second. Well, when you try to, say, get volunteers and voters for a candidate, it's just, you know, you wind up seeing, at least for me, I see the same people when I go to the same events. And it becomes a challenge because you lack, and we lack this infrastructure in our major cities. And so let's kind of put this into the big picture of the whole United States. And so I spoke with an American University professor, this guy named Dante Cini, who is with the Wall Street Journal. He writes for the Wall Street Journal, also does work with American Communities Project, which is housed at American University. So it's actually an academic institution. And what he did was kind of take all our 3,100 counties and cities, and he classified them. And so he tried to come up with something more sophisticated than urban, suburban, rural. So he has areas, for example, around military bases tend to behave similarly. You have areas with high populations of older people. Graying America tend to behave similarly. I realize that's actually where my parents live in Florida, and so it's me and the seniors at 4 p.m. at dinner, so graying America. But what you have is actually there were 2 qualifications that were or typologies that were very concerning to me. The first of which was big cities. So the big cities is about 73 million people. Okay, and these are just very diverse. It's, you know, you walk down the street, it's all the people you see in, you know, Washington, D.C. The second of which is urban suburbs, and that's really, you know, Arlington County. And what you found is that what used to be just pure suburbia has now urbanized to a point that it's behaving much like the big cities. And those are 66 million people. And so why am I throwing all these numbers at you? And I'm trying to wrap this all up into the big picture problem, and that is, you know, when you add this all up, Obama won big cities by 31 points. Okay? Obama won urban suburbs by 16 points. So taken together, you have 140 million people, 44% of the population. So if you can say, you can extrapolate that and say 44% of the electorate voted for Obama by more than 15 points. So what that means